Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. This week's Rseat is a Group 3 tire wear sprint, which means there are not a ton of options, but there are a few. Let's get into it. A fantastic all-arounder, the RX Vision doesn't lack in any category whatsoever. Most importantly for this week's race, I was able to push, fight through traffic, and still have tire at the end of the race. Perhaps just as importantly, when I did start getting low on tire towards the end of the race, it wasn't really scary. Despite the fact that the car can be a little squirrely, it wasn't too squirrely when the tires were really worn. As is usually the case, the Group 3 leaderboard is pretty well balanced. The top 10 as well as the top 100 feature a lot of different cars, but that of course doesn't tell the whole story. I was able to get 46th globally with just a few suspension tweaks, but I will note that I didn't use any setup changes when it came to the race itself. My setup is actually pretty close to stock, but it is different enough that I'd be wary using it in the race itself because I did do this race that I'm about to show you completely stock. Starting off, I'd like to note that I used +1 brake balance for the time trial. During the race itself, I changed it up just a bit, starting with +2. The first braking zone is about halfway between the access road and the curbing right here. We're going to get down to 3rd gear and start turning in right about the 50-meter board. Notice that I'm using 100% brake until I get to about the 1st gear when I start turning in, and I'm actually going to miss the apex on purpose. There's a big drop right next to the apex. Back up to 2nd before we get on throttle, and make sure you fix any oversteer before it becomes a problem. Track out all the way until you get about to the end of this curbing here on the left. At that point, we're going to turn in, then lift, then brush the brakes just a little bit so we can get ourselves all the way to the apex. Carefully apply the throttle, making sure you're not going to get any understeer, and as soon as you're certain that you've got enough front grip, get all the way on the throttle, trying to track all the way out so you're just barely on the curb here. From here, aim your car in a straight line so you're fully back on the pavement by the time this dark green part of the track disappears. Hit the brakes on this white square as you get all the way onto the curb from the green. Immediately start trail braking, drop to 1st gear, and try to get as much onto the curb as you possibly can while keeping your outside tires over the white line. Back up to 2nd before accelerating, trying to stay all the way on the curb until it ends right here. Aim for the roller coaster in the distance and use the tire marks that are on the ground as a guide to know when to turn in. As soon as the weight is transferred to the outside of the car, we're going to lift, upshift, and get back on the throttle, trying to monster truck over that curb and going all the way out to this light green part of the track. As long as you don't go all the way in the dirt and grass, you should have clean tires and a clean lap. Keeping in mind this is the sprint layout, we're going to look for the 100-meter board as our braking zone. We're going to downshift to 2nd really quickly and immediately start trail braking at the 50-meter board. We want to get down to 1st gear as well, and we're going to let the car coast in a little bit. All the elevation changes here can be really difficult to deal with, so again, make sure we're in 2nd gear and be very patient on the throttle, letting the car settle before you get fully on the throttle, and of course tracking out all the way to this curb. Get yourself all the way to the other side of the track and place your car as wide as you possibly can without getting on the grass. Before you get to that white line there on the left is when you want to brake. I did it a little bit too late, so I didn't quite use enough of this curb, and I ended up understeering just a little bit. If you nail that inside curb, you'll be able to go a lot faster than that. Look for this track marshal here on the left. Before you get to him, you want to completely switch directions, turn first, then lift, then touch the brakes. As is the case always when it comes to switching directions, it's important to get the weight transferred before you do any braking. Done correctly, you shouldn't have to worry about any understeer, and you should be able to get on the throttle right as soon as you hit that apex, and it's really important, of course, to get on the throttle as early as possible because this is a pretty long straight. Approaching the final chicane, I want you to keep in mind that you pretty much have to go straight through it. Brake right as we get to the 100-meter board, and what we want to do is turn right about at the 50-meter board. I turned in a little bit too late, so I had to linger on the brakes a little bit too long, which means that I scrubbed off too much speed. If you turn in a little bit earlier, you should be able to get off the brakes earlier and then on the throttle earlier, using the throttle to balance as you go over both of the curb sections. As soon as you can get up on this high part of the curb, get all the way up on it and look for this cone here on the inside. Brake hard, but immediately start trail braking. Get to 2nd gear, and we want to hug this apex, but you don't want to go all the way up on that curb because it probably will make you spin. If you stay on the pavement, you should be able to get on the throttle pretty early and then track all the way out, just making sure that you avoid the sand because of course that'll ruin your whole lap. Come off the curb before you hit the grass, and that's your lap. Like I said before, I used +1 for this time trial. Be really mindful of how the track kind of kinks inward right at the braking zone. I like to avoid hitting the apex really tightly because it does drop off really sharply there and it can unsettle the car. And be really careful getting on the throttle there, it's really easy to slide out. If you don't make it all the way to the outside of the track before turning in left, that's totally fine, and do try to get all the way off the green before hitting the brakes here. It's easy to use too much curb here, so make sure you're not going over the white line, and turning in here is going to be really all about feel. It's going to take some trial and error before you're used to it. There's another pretty sharp elevation change right in the middle of this corner, so be really patient on the throttle and really try to feel what the car is doing as you're getting on the throttle. I probably lost half a tenth or more by braking too late and not using enough of this curb here, because then I understeered and had to get off the throttle. I think I was able to recover and got a pretty good exit here, but I do think that the effects of missing that first turn in probably cost me a lot towards the end of the lap. I also will note that I turned in too late and scrubbed off too much speed. You can actually carry a few more miles per hour through this chicane, and that can make a huge difference when it comes to your total lap time. I don't like to late apex this final corner, because in the end it really only helps if you're trying to get a really good next lap. When you're trying to finish off a really strong lap, just hug it and keep the shortest line possible, and of course, avoid the dirt on the exit there. If you've played this game at all online since the last update, you probably know that there's something fishy going on with the servers. They have finally made a statement, they know that there's an issue and they are working on a fix, but it's actually really difficult to even get in a race right now. This screen was stuck here for nearly 6 minutes, but luckily, because we did have patience, we were able to jump in the race, and that meant that we only had 10 opponents. You heard it here first. The very best way to win with an anti-meta car is just to have more patience than the people who are quitting out of the race before they jump in the race. In all seriousness, it is really annoying, and I know a lot of people are not playing whatsoever this week, so those of you who are sticking with it and are still trying to find some pace, I hope this helps you out. I had just mentioned in the last part of this guide that I thought I was using +2 or +3 brakes, and as you can see on the screen, I'm actually just at +1, so color me surprised. I think I did have to move it back to either neutral or even -1 to try to make up for the fact that the rear tires were dying, but either way, +1 did seem okay, and the car should be fine as long as you don't do something like +2 or +3. Those of you who have raced here many times probably recognize this as almost as dangerous as Monza T1, but of course with less people on track, it makes it a little bit less dangerous. No practice tried to defend, and that actually gave me an opportunity to just pass on the outside, which made our job a little bit easier. Getting in front of the meta car is always a really good feeling, especially if it happens early, but up next we had a Porsche driver, and the Porsche tires do kind of die out maybe 3 or 4 laps before the end of the race, but before that they're very, very fast. As is always the case, it's important to know the exact track limits, and it's possible that he did not know that you can go all the way out there, which gave me the advantage of being able to track out and get on the throttle a lot earlier. I was also really brave on the brakes there, and I think that's one of the benefits of the car, because it made that pass really, really easy. He gave me a lot of space, I didn't push him wide, and we moved on. The RCZ up ahead is also a very fast car that kind of eats through the tires. If you're really careful, you can make this car work, but I wouldn't suggest it if you're bad on tires or if you don't really like handling sketchy cars, especially towards the end of the race. I was very glad to have the RCZ slipstream, because the Porsche's one weakness is its top speed, and if it had my slipstream, then it might be able to make a move there, but since I had the slipstream, it kind of evened it out. And as you can see, the Porsche was making a really big attack when it came to that braking zone, so I think I just barely got out of there unscathed. If you're a longtime viewer, you're probably tired of hearing me talk about this. If you're new, what you should know is that I like to pay attention to the people I'm racing against, and I didn't know anything about Tarantula. So I was watching and waiting, and after seeing him make that big mistake there, I figured he may be flustered. It might be just because of his skill level, but either way, I was going to push and try to make a move as fast as I possibly could. I noticed that he didn't use all of the track on the corner exit, so I thought I should be able to make a move pretty easily, and when I saw him not sacrifice the first exit for that second corner, I knew that I could pull a move off if I went for it. Positioning myself to make it clear that I was going to go for a pass even if I didn't have an overlap on him, he luckily gave me a lot of space, and we were able to get the grip and get a much better exit than he was, and that was that. It was only lap 2 of 15, and like I mentioned before, both the cars behind me have really good pace, but they're not great on the tires, so my plan was to defend as hard as I possibly could if either of them tried to make a move, but it looked like I was going to be able to get away pretty cleanly. I'd raced Colonel Torado a few times, and I did know that the second and first place guys are going to have pretty good pace, so I was looking forward to some battles, but I don't know exactly what happened there. Colonel Torado kind of took care of himself, and so you're already in podium position. Sabatka is a buddy of ours. He actually shared his replay so I could get some good footage and pictures of it. He's a very fast driver who's only been driving for a very short period of time. It has become a tradition anytime he goes off to say, poor Mihao. Mihao is his screen name on Twitch, of course. But I'm so sorry to include that. It was just so perfect that it happened today of all times. But yeah, again, I got to give him props. He's a very fast driver, especially considering how little time he spent on the game. He's going to be very fast in the future, so keep your eye out for him. Now, with all that said, it's important to note exactly how far behind Sergemez I was. I'm about 2.5 seconds behind. We're going to jump forward a few times, and we're going to pay attention to my tire wear. Same place, next lap. I now have the fastest lap, but he's just a little bit further ahead, or maybe the same distance ahead. Either way, like I said before, the Porsche has really good pace. And also, to be fair to myself, I was still trying to figure out this car because I had spent exactly 4 laps on this car so far. Same place next lap. I've gotten about 3/10 closer to him, but of course that's not very much, and I still of course have the fastest lap. Next lap, we've gained about a half second on him. Now, it's impossible to tell exactly why that is. It's possible that he has just made some mistakes. It's also possible that he's already destroyed his tires by now and I was able to keep them good. It's also possible that I've been able to improve my pace as I'm getting used to the car, or a combination of all those things. But again, I did hit another fastest lap. One more lap ahead. It looks like I've cut another half second out of the delta and I'm about to be in slipstream range. On the next lap, we're about 8/10 closer this time, and we're definitely well within the slipstream range. I'm about to make a pass, and he just pulls over. Now, this is something that I talk about pretty often. Again, if you're new, this might be news to you. If you've been watching my channel for a while, then you've probably heard me talk about this way too much. But one of the biggest tactics that you can employ when you're racing against people who you know are faster than you is simply not battling them until it becomes really obvious that you've got an opportunity to do so. So it's now the start of lap 9, and he's definitely noticed that I've been able to take big chunks out of the delta every single lap, and I was getting closer and closer, and a pass was pretty much inevitable. He could, and of course it's well within his rights, of course, to defend against me, but if he did that, he would destroy both of our tires, which would slow us down even more. And if No Practice didn't have any issues like that, and he was able to keep good pace, and if he was in a good car that didn't have tire wear issues, then he could potentially beat both of us. By giving me that position without any kind of battle, he can ensure that he's not going to have to worry about anyone coming up from behind and sniping the position, third-partying us, if you will. Now, even though dirty air is definitely bad for the tires, if you're smart about it, you could potentially go a little bit slower around the corners, use less tire then, and then use the slipstream to your advantage to stay close to the person in front of you who has better pace. But who knows what he's thinking. I would bet that he just wanted to make sure that he didn't potentially ruin both of our races so he could stick close to me and not worry about the third person passing. Jumping all the way to the end, you'll notice that I still have a little bit of tire left, and No Practice did end up passing Sergemez, but Sergemez did maintain that podium position, which he may not have done if he didn't just give me that position. If he battled, he might have lost even more and been out of podium contention. I didn't look, but I would bet that the 911 has 0 tires left, and the 650X that No Practice is in has more tires than mine, since it is the meta car. But the RX Vision was impressive, and even though I had barely any tire left, I did have some, and it wasn't scary at all. Once again, thank you very much for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will have another one of these guides every single week. Thank you.